is a comedy drama period piece written and directed by Damien Chazelle. Many of you know him as the director of Whiplash, La La Land, and First Man. This movie takes place in, I believe, the early 1920s. I could be dead wrong about that, but it basically takes place during the era of movies when they transitioned from silent films into what were known as talkies. You know, when they started using sound and actual dialogue in movies. It shows how a handful of characters are trying to adapt to that new age of cinema and ultimately the rise and fall of characters during that age. Damien Chazelle, I think, has really established himself as one of those rising directors in Hollywood right now. I still say rising because he doesn't have a long list of movies to really stand off of, at least not like a lot of the other ones do. First big movie he brought to us was Whiplash, which has become for me one of my all-time favorite movies. He also gave us a musical movie called La La Land, which I finally watched for the first time not long ago, actually. And as someone who is not a fan of musicals whatsoever, that's actually a damn good movie. And then he gave us the biographical pick First Man about the landing on the moon, which is a movie that I appreciate and respect, but I wasn't like in love with. But regardless, I was very much looking forward to see Babylon whenever it was going to get released. Initially, for a while though, I thought it would be one of those like, alright, it's going to get released very limitedly on Christmas, and it'll get its wide release in January, and then I was pleasantly surprised to hear it got moved up a couple days so it would get its wide release early. I think that's why I waited to do my top 10 best list, because I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, now Babylon got an earlier release. Maybe I should see that before I make the list because, you know, good cast, great director, who knows? And what Babylon is this wild, rambunctious, in-your-face, crazy ride about this transition cinema that essentially serves as both a love letter and suicide note to cinema that is going to very much polarize audiences, and I fucking loved it. I want to start with Diego Calva because I don't think I've seen this guy in anything, but I really liked his character in this movie. He has this huge admiration for movies and for cinema. He gives this monologue towards the beginning of this movie about why movies are so important and why they matter, how when you go into a great movie you can escape into that world and it becomes such an experience. I really connected with that because I'm just like, yes, when I explain my love to movies, that is exactly what I tell people right there. It's really great seeing him really grow as this kind of producer in Hollywood. You know, him getting brought on to work on these sets, work with these different filmmakers and these actors and seeing what goes into it and how just awe-inspiring it is for him and how hard he's trying to make it into that, how he'll go to any extent to make a movie work. I think what I really love with his storyline is seeing kind of the pressure there was in making movie scenes back then. Like, you know, okay, the lighting had to be right, the sun had to be in the skies, like we had to get a movie scene shot and done at this point in time where it's gonna set budget and production back days. I don't know if that's as much the case as it is today, but regardless, back in the day, I'm sure it was a very big deal, and I like seeing that sort of drive and pressure that exists in certain filmmakers and how it shows that working with movies is not a business that everyone is cut out for, even the people who believe it is. Brad Pitt was also great in this movie too. It's really cool seeing kind of his role in this movie. I mean, you know, he's this great star in these silent movies, and then he has to transition into these talkies, and you know, at that point he's kind of an aging actor. He's been at this for a while, and you know, because he's not like the top of the line guy anymore, he's not like the Tom Hanks of the industry anymore who everyone's just begging to be in a movie now. He's kind of nearing the end of his career, and because of that he has to take on some of the smaller, shittier roles, and it's kind of giving him kind of a bleak outlet on, you know, making movies again. I feel like it's what a lot of actors deal with. Like a lot of actors, maybe when they're near the end of their career, but because they love what they do so much, they don't want to give it up, but they're kind of forced to take on these projects that aren't good, that they don't believe in. There's another moment of exchange between him and this other character, this like editor of sorts, and she kind of explains to him, it's like, what you do is great, it's impactful, and your legacy will live on, but eventually you will die and someone new will take your place and they will have the spotlight. It kind of felt like one of those like ultimates, like, do you feel you did enough in your career? And if you feel you did, that's a legacy that will carry on, but eventually that's all people see you as. But now I gotta get into easily the performance of the movie, maybe my all-around favorite performance of the year. Margot Robbie is fucking incredible in this movie. She's this crazy, wild party girl. She's, she believes that she has the it factor. She believes she has everything that is capable to be a star. I really love seeing the development in her character. Like, ultimately, she gets a break to star in a silent movie. She's fantastic in it. She becomes a huge star in those. And again, when they transition into the talkies, you'll notice I'm talking about that a lot. I'll get to that more in a minute. She starts to struggle a little bit because you quickly see an entirely new direction in filmmaking that it has to go in. There's a scene in this movie that reminds me a hell of a lot like the scene in The Disaster Artist when, he keeps coming out, he has to say the line, he keeps forgetting the line, they have to do a bunch of different takes. It basically is that here, because now it's like, okay, the lighting has to be perfect, the sound equipment has to be working perfectly, you have to be standing right here in this position, you have to deliver a line loud enough so people can hear you, but not too loud that it disrupts the mics. It becomes an extremely frustrating and grueling process that I think really demonstrated why that transition was so difficult for so many actors. And that's what I really love that this movie was illustrating. It really talked about the evolution of filmmaking. It's like back in the day, that was the most basic of transitions. It went from silent movies to talking movies. That was a transition. It's like now actors had to actually speak in movies, had to actually get their takes right. You couldn't just have someone just give an expression and then, put the dialogue on the screen of what they were saying. Now it's like you have to memorize lines. You have to deliver them the right way. You have to be in the right spot. You have to do it all in this take on the set that probably doesn't have ideal conditions. It really makes you look at how far movies have only continued to go from there. I mean, nowadays, you probably look at actors in Hollywood and they're just like, well, gee, am I capable of playing a superhero? Am I capable of doing a scene in a motion capture suit while we film it underwater? Can I look at a green screen and talk to nothing and still act the way I should be acting if a person was standing right there? It really makes you wonder to yourself, like, a lot of these great changes we see in movies nowadays, they're really great for us as an audience and they benefit us as an audience because they're only getting better and they're looking better and they're sounding better. But for the actors that are playing these parts, you have to ask yourself how difficult a transition it has been for them. As technology evolves, people have to adapt, and sometimes you're seeing it, actors aren't always able to adapt, and it makes you think there were probably some great actors from back in the day that just weren't able to take the next step in movies that they needed to really finish their career the right way. It's a little bit of a dark and depressing thought, but it really hit me where I live, and that's what I really appreciate about this movie. It really illustrates how the evolution of film ends up in the rise and fall of many different celebrities. But yeah, getting back to Margot Robbie for a second, I kind of went on a little bit of a ramble there. But what I really love seeing with her is, like, as she becomes famous, she is someone who really exhibits, like, the effect that fame and being a celebrity can have on you. Because she's not exactly, your proper famous girl. She's not used to interacting with certain groups of people. She kind of just wants to go and be the life of the party, and she can't really do that. She gets caught up with the wrong types of people because of that. Because, once you're famous, there are just these leeches out there that just want to take the money and the fame from you and use it for their own benefit. She was spectacular in this movie. I think it's definitely the best performance of her career, and she should 100% be up for an Oscar in this movie. Love or hate this movie, I don't think anyone out there can argue against me on that. Also, I really love the way this movie is shot. The cinematography, it looks great. Not only does this movie kind of have a look like it took place back in the 1920s or whatever exactly this movie took place, but the movie does my favorite camera trick of all time, which is a lot of scenes are shot in this one continuous take, or what feels like one continuous take. They might have moments here and there where something like really quickly flashes to something else and then really quickly flashes to something else, but it does so in such a subtle way and like a seamless way that it really works, and it still feels like just one continuous take. Like you are there, you are right there for this whole scene, this whole journey that's happening in this moment. I also think this movie really balanced the comedy and the drama in this movie. The movie had moments where it was dramatic, where you really felt a type of way. Maybe you felt a little bit on edge, you felt a little bit, maybe, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but you felt a little bit like, okay, what's really going on here? Like, maybe, I don't know, you felt a little bit just off for some things. But when this movie wanted to be funny, even if it's very like in your face kind of comedy, I was laughing, and quite a bit. You know how I would sum up this movie right here? It feels like The Wolf of Wall Street in Hollywood, but not on Wall Street. I think that's a perfect way to describe this movie. And yes, because of something like that, there are a lot of memorable characters, there are a lot of very good moments of dialogue, but it's also very, very in your face with debauchery. Like, one of the opening scenes is this very long, insane, wild party that's just filled with drugs, sex, nudity, all extremely in your face. It's gonna feel like too much for some people, and it might feel a little too wild and crazy for some people, but for me, it made perfect sense. I mean, this is Hollywood. This is like old age Hollywood, back when, you know, to be famous in these movies was the biggest deal in the world. If there weren't these wild, crazy, insane, sexed out, drugged out parties, I would be shocked if they weren't happening. Also, I'll say this much, similar to The Wolf of Wall Street, this movie is around 3 hours long. In fact, I think it's a little over 3 hours long. And I will say, that's probably something else that's going to put off some people. You know, it's a 3 hour long movie. However you might feel about long movies, I guess that's according to you. But I've always said to the people who say they don't like long movies, what you mean to say is you don't like slow movies. And I guess how you really feel about this type of movie is going to depend, you know, how you feel about the runtime. For me, I was really invested and was really enjoying this movie for so long that the runtime didn't really affect me. The only time it did, I guess this was what I would say would be a little bit of the flaw I would have with this movie, if there is a flaw, it's that around the final part of the movie, what's supposed to be the ending, it kind of did a thing where you keep thinking the movie's going to end and then it doesn't. Something else keeps happening. And I was kind of sitting there like, okay, the movie's going to end right here. Okay, no, it's not going to end right here. Okay, now it's going to end here. Oh, we still got more? Okay, I guess it's still going. I guess there was a moment I was just kind of sitting there waiting. I'm like, okay, when is the movie going to wrap it all up? And I will say, the way the movie does officially end, I actually really appreciated what they did because, again, they kind of pay homage to what movies have become for us today in a way that's told from like the 1920s. So all in all, Babylon, I thought this movie was incredible. The performances across the board are really great, namely the three main characters and especially Margot Robbie, all fantastic. I really hope she gets an Oscar nomination. I hope she fucking wins. She may not, but I do think she's deserving of it. I love how it feels like a love letter to cinema, but it also kind of feels like a suicide note to the actors who have to deal with transitioning in movies. I really did enjoy seeing what the transition was like from going to silent films into talkies and how it was a representation of how film is constantly evolving and constantly changing for us. Some really great moments of dialogue that really stuck with me, in particular like a few monologues between a few different characters that happened. I really enjoyed. Those are the ones that really stuck with me. It had great comedy, it had great drama, it is very wild and very in your face, and that definitely might put off some people. The movie does sometimes feel maybe a little too drawn out at times, but then again, I guess Hollywood is supposed to feel drawn out at times. In the end, although this movie is definitely not going to be for everybody, I dug the absolute shit out of it, and for me, if it hasn't already been established, Damien Chazelle has now joined the rank of giants. 100%. Cannot fucking wait to see what this motherfucker brings us next. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. And as always, don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.